You don't really understand what it means to lose years of your life until you're staring at a cement wall, counting the cracks for the 100th time. I was 24 when I went to prison for a crime I didn't commit, the crime my cousin Landon Pierce did commit. And here's the worst part. Everyone in my family knew it was him. I grew up on the east side of Savannah in a 2-bedroom apartment with peeling paint and a stubborn front door that only locked if you kicked it twice. My mom worked 2 jobs, diner waitress by day, cleaning offices by night. My dad? Gone before I could even remember his face. Landon, on the other hand, grew up on the other side of the river, in a gated community where the streets had names like Maple Glen and Oakwood Court. His dad, my uncle, owned 3 construction companies, drove a new truck every year, and wore the kind of gold watch that caught sunlight like it was showing off. We weren't close, but we'd see each other at family gatherings. Landon was the type who'd show up late, dressed like he was stepping out of a catalog, and start every sentence with, "You know what I just bought?" My grandmother adored him. "That boy's a go-getter," she'd say with pride. Never mind the fact that he'd talk over everyone and couldn't keep a job longer than 6 months without his dad bailing him out. The larceny happened in March 2016. Nearly $85,000 worth of high-end electronics, laptops, tablets, cameras, gone from a distribution warehouse on the outskirts of the city. This wasn't some smash-and-grab job. Whoever did it knew exactly when the alarms were disabled for the shift change. They knew the guard rotation, the blind spots in the security cameras, even the brand of padlocks used on the loading dock. I'd never even been near that place. Back then, I was working part-time at a tire shop, scraping together just enough for rent and gas. I didn't have the money or the connections for something like that, and I sure as hell didn't have the nerve. But one Thursday night, I came home from work and found 2 patrol cars outside my apartment. My neighbor's kid was staring from the stairs, clutching his bike. The cops were waiting for me, warrant in hand. They tore through my place like it was a game. My clothes ended up in piles on the floor, couch cushions flipped, drawers dumped out. And then, one of them came out of my bedroom, carrying a black duffel bag I'd never seen in my life. Inside, stacks of unopened electronics, each still tagged, each with a serial number I now know was logged as stolen from that warehouse. I felt my throat close. "That's not mine," I said, my voice cracking. "I've never seen that before." The officer holding it gave me this flat, almost bored look. "You'll have a chance to explain downtown." I told them to check for fingerprints, DNA, anything. They said the bag was clean, which they claimed proved I'd been careful. By the time my court date rolled around, I'd convinced myself the truth would come out. I had nothing to do with this, and that had to matter. Right? Then the prosecution rolled out their credible witness, one of Landon's drinking buddies. He swore under oath that I'd bragged about having an inside connection at the warehouse and that I'd been cashing in on it. My public defender looked more like a man who wanted an early lunch than someone defending my life. He didn't even challenge the witness's history of lying under oath in other cases. The final blow was a grainy security clip from the warehouse parking lot, a man in a hoodie about my height driving a beat-up Honda Civic like mine. You couldn't see the plates, you couldn't see the face. But the jury didn't need details. They saw what they wanted to see. It took them less than 2 hours to convict me. 6 years in state prison. Prison ages you in ways you don't see at first. It's in the way your shoulders hunch when someone walks too close. The way you start cataloging every sound, every movement around you without realizing it. Family visits dwindled after the first year. My mom came when she could, but the bus trip took half a day and she had her health to think about. Most cousins stayed away. Too awkward, too guilty, maybe both. The only person who kept showing up was my younger sister, Maya. She'd lean in close during visits and say, "It was Landon. We all know it. Nobody's saying anything because of Uncle Richard." Uncle Richard, Landon's dad, had a way of making problems disappear, whether it was unpaid debts or drunk driving charges. I figured that's why no one in the family would say out loud what we all knew. Every time I told Maya the same thing. "Don't do anything yet. I'll handle it when I get out." In 2022, They handed me a bag with my old clothes and the Timex watch my dad gave me when I was 17. I walked out into sunlight that felt too bright, like the world had been turned up a notch while I was gone. I was older, harder, but my head was clearer than it had ever been. I'd spent 6 years thinking about every lie Landon had told, every piece of false evidence, every smug look he probably wore while I sat in a cell. I wasn't just going to clear my name. I was going to take down everyone who helped bury me. And the first thing I learned when I started digging, it wasn't just Landon. It was cops, lawyers, a judge. All of them got something out of putting me away. If you want, I can make part 2 a detailed, slow burn dive into how the narrator starts gathering evidence, the risky moves, the small victories, and the first signs that powerful people are trying to shut them up before they can expose the truth. The day after I got out, I sat at my kitchen table, if you could call it that, a wobbly thing I'd bought off Facebook Marketplace for $20. I laid out a notebook, a pen, and the letter from the Department of Corrections confirming the end of my sentence. Then I wrote one name at the top of the page, Landon Pierce. Underneath it, I wrote every single thing I remembered from the trial. The dates, the witnesses, the evidence, the things my public defender didn't object to, even the way the prosecutor smiled like he knew the outcome before the jury ever left the room. I didn't know it yet, but that page would turn into a map, not just of Landon's lies, but of the network that helped him get away with them. The first thread I pulled on was the so-called credible witness, Trevor Mullins, Landon's old drinking buddy. I figured if anyone might talk, it'd be him. People like Trevor don't keep secrets unless they're being paid to. I found him working part-time at a car wash on the South Side. He looked older than I remembered. Pale skin, jittery hands, the kind of look that comes from bad choices and too much cheap whiskey. At first, he pretended not to know me. Then I told him I wasn't here to start anything. I just wanted the truth. "You don't get it," he muttered, looking over his shoulder. "They told me what to say. Said it was all taken care of. I just had to make it sound believable." "They?" I asked. Trevor rubbed the back of his neck. "Landon and someone from the DA's office, a woman, said if I helped put the case to bed, they'd drop my pending charges. I was staring at 2 years for possession, man. What would you have done?" I left with my hands shaking. That was the first time I realized this wasn't just a family betrayal. This was official, institutional. I went to the county courthouse to request my trial records. The clerk gave me a look like I was asking for nuclear launch codes. But after some paperwork and $42 in copy fees, I walked out with a stack of files. Flipping through, I noticed something odd. The security footage that supposedly showed me in the warehouse parking lot was logged into evidence 2 weeks before I was even charged. That shouldn't have been possible unless they already knew I was going to be the suspect. And the chain of custody on the duffel bag? Sloppy. Signatures missing, time scratched out. In some cases, it went hours without a recorded handler. That's evidence tampering 101. I started making a list of everyone connected to my case. Cops, attorneys, the judge, even the court reporter. Maya helped, spending her evenings on her laptop in my kitchen, digging through property records, campaign donations, and LinkedIn profiles. 2 weeks in, I came home to find my apartment door slightly open. Nothing was stolen, but the notebook I'd been keeping, the one with names, dates, and notes from Trevor, was gone. That night, an unmarked car idled outside my building for nearly an hour. I knew then that whatever I was poking at wasn't just dangerous for Landon. It was dangerous for people who had the power to make me disappear again. Through an old friend, I got introduced to Rachel Kim, a freelance journalist who'd covered corruption in smaller Georgia counties. She was skeptical at first. Everyone has a wrongly accused story, and most don't pan out. Then I handed her Trevor's statement. I watched her eyes sharpen like a knife. "If you're telling me a DA's office witness was bribed into lying, that's not just a story," she said. "That's a career ender for someone, maybe a few someones." But she warned me, if you go down this road, you need more than one shaky witness. You need proof so airtight that no one can spin it. Because once this hits the wrong desk, they'll come after you harder than last time. I didn't sleep that night. Not because I was afraid, though I was, but because I realized I finally had someone who believed me. And if I was going to take down Landon and the people who helped him, I'd have to be smarter, faster, and a hell of a lot more careful than before. The next move? Getting my hands on evidence that proved the corruption wasn't just local. It went higher. Much higher. Rachel wasn't kidding when she said we needed more than one shaky witness. And if there's one thing I learned in prison, it's this. People lie, but paper trails don't. We decided to focus on the money. Corruption leaves fingerprints in bank ledgers long after everyone's wiped their hands clean. Maya was the one who found it. She was hunched over her laptop in my kitchen again, earbuds in, scrolling through property tax records. "Hey," she said, squinting at the screen. "Doesn't it seem weird that Judge Holbrook bought a $220,000 cabin in cash the same month your trial ended?" I felt my stomach clench. Holbrook had presided over my case, leaning so hard toward the prosecution you'd think he was on their payroll. Now it looked like maybe he actually was. Rachel dug deeper. The cabin was purchased through a shell company registered in Delaware. The kind of setup people use when they don't want their names attached to a deal. But one of the managing partners of that shell company? None other than Elliot Pierce, Landon's father. It wasn't just a family betrayal anymore. It was a transaction. Once we knew what to look for, the pieces fell fast. Rachel pulled court records for 5 other cases Judge Holbrook had presided over in the past 3 years. All had suspiciously fast convictions. All involved defendants with fewer resources than their accusers. And in 3 of those cases, a different DA, the same one who'd handled my case, had been involved. One defendant had gone bankrupt during his trial, and his foreclosed house was later sold to a private buyer connected to the same Delaware LLC that had bought Holbrook's cabin. It was like pulling back wallpaper and finding a whole other house behind it. The night Rachel published her first small piece, nothing too big, just a blog post about irregularities in county court property dealings, I came home to find my mailbox hanging open. Inside was a single Polaroid. It was a picture of me and Maya leaving the courthouse the week before. Written in thick black marker across the bottom, "Stop." I called Rachel. "They're watching us." She didn't even sound surprised. "Of course they are. That means we're getting close, but it also means we have to move faster." Up to that point, Landon had been just the spoiled cousin who lit the match that burned my life down. But the deeper I dug, the more I saw he was tied to the bigger scheme. Bank records, leaked to Rachel by someone she wouldn't name, showed that within a month of my conviction, Landon had deposited $40,000 in consulting fees from a construction project that didn't exist. The check was signed by a company linked to the same Delaware LLC. It clicked. Landon hadn't just framed me because he could. He did it because someone needed him to. My conviction had been the currency for his payoff. The problem was, finding the corruption was one thing. Proving it in a way that could survive a courtroom or the court of public opinion was another. That's when I crossed a line I told myself I never would. I broke into Trevor Mullins' apartment. I knew it was risky, but I also knew Trevor kept insurance, a habit he'd picked up from running with dangerous people. Sure enough, in the back of his closet, inside a taped-up shoebox, I found an old prepaid cell phone. On it were text messages from the month before my arrest, messages from a number registered to the DA's office. They spelled it out. "Say you saw him bragging about the warehouse job. We'll take care of your possession charge." I took pictures of everything and put the phone back exactly where I found it. Rachel's tone changed after that. "This isn't just a local corruption story anymore," she said, tapping her pen against her notepad. "If we put this out, it's going to get picked up statewide, maybe even nationally. But once that happens, they can't quietly bury it anymore, which means they're going to come at you with everything they have." I didn't care. I'd lost 6 years of my life. I'd be damned if I was going to lose the truth too. We started preparing a full package: documents, witness statements, property records, bank transfers. Enough to make it impossible for anyone, judge, DA, or cop, to claim ignorance. The night before we were going to send it to a major news outlet, my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. "You won't live to see this printed." The morning the story went live, I woke up to 23 missed calls. Rachel's article wasn't just a blog post this time. It was front-page news on a major national outlet. Headline: Georgia County corruption. Judge, DA, and local businessmen implicated in property for conviction scheme. My name was in the first paragraph. Samuel Greer, wrongfully convicted of 2016 warehouse theft, along with the words I'd been waiting 6 years to hear. New evidence suggests he may have been framed. Within hours, it was everywhere. TV news, radio, Twitter, even TikTok videos, breaking it down for people who'd never set foot in Savannah. Reporters camped outside the courthouse. The governor's office announced an independent review, which everyone knew was code for "We're in damage control." The Polaroid in my mailbox, the text message threat, they'd all been photographed and included in Rachel's piece. They weren't just warning signs anymore. They were evidence of intimidation. And then it happened. The Georgia Bureau of Investigation announced warrants for Judge Holbrook, District Attorney Marianne Voss, and 2 officers from the county sheriff's department. They called it a conspiracy to defraud the justice system for personal and financial gain. Landon didn't get arrested that first week, but I knew it was coming. The documents Rachel had dug up, bank transfers, fake consulting invoices, made it impossible for him to hide. When the news broke that he'd been indicted on charges of perjury, fraud, and conspiracy, I felt, not joy exactly, but a kind of grim satisfaction. Like the scales had finally started to tilt back towards center. Maya called me that night. "Do you believe it now?" she asked. "That the truth can still matter?" I didn't answer right away, because the truth was, I wasn't sure yet. For every person who called me a victim, there was another calling me an opportunist. Old mugshots resurfaced online. Trolls flooded my social media saying I'd just gotten lucky because the people who framed me happened to get caught. But here's what they didn't know. The state didn't just reopen my case. They vacated my conviction entirely. It was like it had never existed. Legally, anyway. What they also didn't know was that I had agreed to testify in exchange for full immunity from any lingering charges they might try to pin on me. I wasn't leaving any cracks they could crawl back through. I sat in the courtroom months later, not as a defendant, but as a witness. I watched Judge Holbrook, still in his tailored suit, but without the robe that once gave him power, sit across from the jury. I told them about the cabin, about the shell company, about the way he'd stared at me during my sentencing like he was daring me to speak up. Landon sat 2 tables over, his smugness replaced with the pale, sweaty look of a man realizing his money can't buy silence anymore. Trevor testified too, voice shaking but steady enough to land blow after blow. When the verdict came back, guilty on all counts for every single one of them, the courtroom was dead silent for a beat. Then the reporters started scribbling, and I knew the story was going to live a long time. Clearing my name didn't give me back the 6 years I'd lost. It didn't erase the birthdays I missed, the jobs I never got, the friends who stopped writing. But it gave me something else, the chance to choose what came next. Rachel's piece won awards. She tried to split the credit, but the truth was, without her, I'd still be counting cracks on a prison wall. Maya went back to school, saying she wanted to study criminal justice to keep the next Landon from winning. As for me, I left Savannah. Too many ghosts, too many people who'd seen me as guilty before they saw me as human. Some nights, I still dream about the trial. The wrong one. I'm back in that courtroom in 2016, watching the jury file in, knowing they're about to take everything from me. Then I wake up, heart pounding, and remember, this time, it was them walking out in chains. Thank you for listening. If you enjoyed, please like, share, and subscribe for more content. If you want to share your stories, please comment below. Additionally, what is your opinion on the poster's decision?